What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I came across a really disgusting report that almost made me vomit. ESPN is pretty much openly plotting to rigging the college football playoffs. We'll lead the episode off with that. Last year, Oklahoma had the second worst offense in the SEC, but with the addition of John Mateer, he's about to pour some gasoline on this thing, and the Sooners are about to go from having one of the worst offenses in this conference to one of the best. There's a major shakeback on the rise for Florida State football. UCLA and Tennessee have unofficially completed the first ever trade in the history of college football. Yes, we've gotten to that point in this sport where we have trades taking place. Thank you, name, image, and likeness. Mario Cristobal could finally beat the fraud allegations this year. I'll explain what he has to prove at Miami this upcoming season. And the transfer portal at this point, there's no shame in this thing. You got guys who are starting out at one school, then transferring to a rival team, then transferring back to the original school. You got players running off with NIL money despite spending less than 4 months with the program. The transfer portal is just an absolute mess. We'll dive into it all, but before we do, if you like and you want to support the pod, you want to help us grow, all we ask is that you smash that like button. It helps us rank higher in the YouTube search algorithm. Give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available, and let's dive into it. College football is heading in a really disgusting place right now. When it comes to picking the teams that deserve to be in the playoffs, we should be picking the teams that actually deserve a spot in the dance. We shouldn't be selecting teams based off who's going to bring in the biggest ratings, who's going to generate us the most cash. You see, that's the issue with college football now. This sport used to be about pageantry, history, rivalry games mattering, but now it's all about the college football playoffs, and greed is running this sport. And I was really disgusted to see this alleged rumor that television ratings could reportedly be proposed as a criteria for the college football playoff selection committee. So what you're telling me, ESPN, is that you don't want these games to matter. You want to find a reason to justify putting a 6-6 Alabama team in the playoffs over a 2-loss Big 12 champion. That's what you want with this reported proposal. And with the playoffs already about to expand and next year to 14, 16 teams, we know that the SEC and the Big Ten, they want guaranteed playoff spots. They more than likely are going to get their way with it. And ESPN is just running college football into the ground. If you're going to say that ratings are going to be a criteria for the teams that get into the playoffs, you're saying that the games don't matter, and you might as well just get rid of the regular season, get rid of the conference championship games, and just put the same damn 12, 14 teams in the playoffs every single year. These big media personalities that work at these companies like FS1 and ESPN, they're completely brain dead when it comes to what college football is. College football isn't about money. It's not about ratings. It's about history. It's about pageantry. Rivalry games used to mean so much now. Bowl games used to be a big thing, but with the push of the CFP, you wonder why these players opt out of bowl games. You wonder why Cam Ward sat out the second half of the Part-Tart Bowl. Because it doesn't matter anymore. Money and ratings is the only thing that is important to ESPN. And it's just a dumb way to try to evaluate what teams deserve to be in the field for opportunity to compete for a national championship. Teams can't control how much revenue they generate, how many great ratings they're able to draw. Arizona State, more people in that area probably are going to want to watch that team than the rest of the country. There's nothing they can do to control that. You can't control what people want to watch you. You can't control how interesting you are. The only thing that you can control is the wins and the losses on the gridiron. And that's the only thing that should matter when picking what teams get into the playoffs. And let's just be honest, the ESPN is openly plotting to rig the college football playoffs. That's what this is. And let's just be honest, we already had a feeling this thing was rigged a few years ago when they put in a one-loss Alabama over an undefeated Power 4 conference champion and Florida State. So now you just want to be open with it. And of course, the guys working at ESPN aren't going to have a problem with it. They don't want to see a school like Boise State or Arizona State in the playoffs. You just want to see all of the big brands, which I don't. I want to see the 12 or the 14, however many teams this thing expands into, and the playoffs. I don't care about who's the most appealing to watch. I care about watching the best teams go toe-to-toe for a shot to hoist that gold championship title trophy. Miss me with all of this nonsense about money, ratings. I don't care. What does any of this have to do with the results on the field? You are trying to put in teams that are undeserving of being in the playoffs just with this assumption that the best teams in this sport reside in only 2 conferences. That isn't true. What if Clemson is better than any other team in the Big Ten or the SEC this year? Are you going to leave them out because they're not a massive ratings draw? What if Arizona State goes undefeated? Are you going to leave them out because they play in the Big 12 and nobody really watches that conference a lot outside of Colorado State and BYU? What has this sport come to? Serious question. Because when I saw this report come down on my feed, I had to go on Google and confirm it with several other reputable sources because I couldn't believe how disgusting it was for something like this to come out. You should never determine what teams deserve to be in the playoffs based off ratings and revenue. What the hell is that? That isn't college football. That's not sports at all. What you are doing is what the WWE does. You're trying to script the outcomes. College football, last time I checked, wasn't played in overalls and underwear. It's played with pads and helmets. If you were going to put in teams based off ratings, you might as well have just left Indiana and SMU out of the playoffs and put in Alabama or Ole Miss. That's what ESPN wants to do. They want to do everything they can to give the big boys an even bigger advantage than what they already have. How many advantages do you got to give the SEC and the Big Ten? They already have access to more NIL money than any of the other conferences. They got stacked rosters. They got pretty much all of the best coaches in college football. Now you want to give them guaranteed spots, and then if they're not able to warrant getting the guaranteed spot, you just want to force them in anyway for the sake of ratings and money? What the F is this? This is disgusting. It made me want to vomit when I saw this, and it makes me no longer want to watch any college football games that ESPN produces because they are disrespecting this sport. There's nothing wrong with money. Money makes the world go around. We all know this. But the pursuit of money is what leads to the demise of a lot of great companies and a lot of good people. When you chase money and you prioritize money over the on-the-field results, you are pretty much watering down these games being played. These players might as well opt out before the season starts. And we wonder why bowl games don't matter anymore. ESPN is a huge reason for it. At this point, I don't even know if it's worth watching college football anymore. All this sport is now is about the logo on the side of your helmet, how much NIL money you can spend to steal players off other teams. this isn't college football anymore. And it's not even football, in my opinion. You pretty much are turning this into the WWE, openly plotting to just force teams into the playoffs for the sake of ratings. Like, huh? What are we doing? If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so you don't miss when we drop new content. Oklahoma was dead last in the SEC in passing yards per game. They had the second worst passing offense in this conference. But that's about to change with the addition of John Mateer out of the transfer portal. He was the #1 rated quarterback from this past portal cycle. And last season at Washington State, he scored more touchdowns than Oklahoma's offense did as a whole. And he was the only quarterback in all of the nation that had 20-plus passing touchdowns and 10-plus rushing touchdowns. And when you watch John Mateer, he's like a more athletic version of Bo Nix. Not only is he a really efficient passer, really accurate, makes good decisions with the football, but he's a really good athlete as well when he decides to tuck and run. And John Mateer is pretty much pouring gasoline on Oklahoma's offense. This is going to be a unit that goes from being the worst in the SEC to possibly one of the best in this conference this year, with everything that John Mateer brings to OU's offense following his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, down to Norman. Him and Jaden Knott, who they recently picked up out of the portal. He was the best running back available during the spring portal window. John Mateer and Jaden Knott are going to be a nightmare backfield for opposing defenses this upcoming season. You have somebody in John Mateer that forced 55 missed tackles last year. That's the equivalent to a running back. And he also had the second most rushing touchdowns in college football as well. With the ability that John Mateer has running the football, it's going to open up things for the passing game, because now if you want to try to slow down Oklahoma's rushing attack, you're going to have to put more guys in the box. You're going to have to put more guys around the line of scrimmage to contain this dude. And when you start doing that, then Oklahoma can start beating you with those RPOs, play action pass down the field. Oklahoma was 101st in passing efficiency last season. John Mateer by himself was 8th in America in passing efficiency. With all of the bevy of riches he has to throw to at wide receiver, they got guys that's like 6'5", running 4'4", 4'3". This is easily one of the better wide receiving corps in this conference. The world is about to find out how good Deion Burks is with John Mateer at quarterback. John Mateer is going to have the same impact on Oklahoma that we saw Cam Ward have on the Miami Hurricanes last year. Before Cam Ward arrived to South Florida, Miami's offense was unwatchable. And then he gets there, and not only is Miami the best offense in college football, averaging damn near 40 points per game, but you also saw Miami come really close to making it to the CFP. You can see the same thing happen with John Mateer at Oklahoma this year. This is a team that has a lot of talent that was underutilized, not because of poor coaching necessarily, but also because the quarterback play was dreadful. If you watch that Tennessee game and you watch Jackson Arnold chucking up all of those turnovers, you would have thought that he got paid off by Vegas to lose that game intentionally. You finally have not only just competent quarterback play, but John Mateer could go down as one of the best quarterbacks in the history of Oklahoma football. And they've had some really good ones, from Josh Heupel, the Baker Mayfield, Landry Jones. Landry Jones is an OG. A lot of y'all new folks might not remember Landry Jones, but in terms of just a pure talent standpoint, I don't believe Oklahoma has ever had a quarterback in the history of their program as good as what John Mateer is. He's an efficient passer, but he also is the equivalent to a running back when he decides to run the ball. Now you can utilize more RPOs, more design read options to get defenses off balance, which that was really the only way Jackson Arnold was effective last year, which was when he was running the ball. John Mateer is a better overall quarterback than what OU has had these last couple of years. Dylan Gabriel was pretty good, but John Mateer is just a way better athlete and just a way more effective player overall than what OU has gotten out of the quarterback position these past couple of years. I'm really excited for this season to start because Oklahoma has been the most disrespected team in the SEC since they joined this conference. There's this assumption that we could see Oklahoma become the next Nebraska. Remember when Nebraska left the Big 12, they joined the Big 10, and they ended up fading away into the pits of irrelevancy? I don't see that happening with Oklahoma. And with John Mateer adding some gasoline on this offense, this is going to be a unit that's going to surprise a lot of folks out there this year. They got talent. Last year, they just had a bunch of injuries on the offensive line. They had to start a lot of young guys at receiver. But this is a stacked unit. And John Mateer is probably going to be in contention for the Heisman Trophy. And I could easily see him being a first-round pick in next year's NFL draft if he declares. He's that good. I don't have any concerns about how well he's going to be able to handle the jump from playing the kind of competition he was at Washington State, the going up a notch playing in the SEC, which most of us consider to be the toughest conference in college football. He doesn't really have to learn anything new. He is following his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle, to Oklahoma, so I don't really expect too much to change with the playbook. Oklahoma is in really good hands with John Mateer at quarterback this year. The amount of gasoline that he's about to pour on this offense is going to make this unit explode, where they go from one of the worst to one of the best offenses within the span of the year in the SEC. I still believe in Mike Norvell as the head coach of Florida State football. Their floor this year is 6 wins. There's no chance they have a season as bad as what we saw last year. That was one of what FSU did in 2024. There has never been a team in the history of college football to win their conference championship and then a year after follow that up with a last place finish in their conference. The ceiling for Florida State is 10 wins, possibly making an appearance in the ACC championship game. With all of the changes that Mike Norvell has made, from the philosophy that the Seminoles have with how they evaluate talent in the portal, the new coaching staff that he has assembled, Florida State is in for a major shakeback this upcoming season. I love the hiring of Tony White as their defensive coordinator. He was at Nebraska last year, and for 4 straight seasons in a row, Tony White has coached top 25 defenses at 2 different schools. Gus Malzahn, he's a wild card calling plays. Although things didn't work out with him as the head coach at UCF, with him taking a reduced role as the OC, only having to worry about calling plays, maximizing the talent on the offense. He doesn't have to worry about the other nuances that comes with being a head coach. He could end up bringing back FSU's rushing attack. When FSU has been really good, they've always had really good running back play. They've always been really dominant running the football down your throat. And getting Thomas Castellanos was the perfect fit for the kind of offense that Gus Malzahn plans to run this year. Thomas Castellanos, if you watched him at Boston College, he was really dynamic. I don't even know how he ended up losing his starting job. It was kind of weird to me because you look at his numbers, he had like 16 touchdowns, only a handful of interceptions. He's a little bit undersized, but with how elusive he is running the ball, with what Gus Malzahn has had success using in the past, design quarterback runs, a lot of RPOs, I could see Thomas Castellanos becoming a top 5 quarterback or better in the ACC this year. And that's going to be a major improvement from what we saw Florida State get out of this position last year. DJ Uiagalelei was a complete wash. Brock Glenn and the other guy that you had out there, Croman Hawk, they weren't really that consistent. At least with Thomas Castanelos, you get somebody that's been a starter for several years inside of this conference. Hell, you got a first-hand glimpse of how good Thomas Castanelos can be when he's playing at his best. He was balling against Florida State when they played early last season. Mike Norvell has normally had success with quarterbacks that have dual threat ability. Jordan Travis, he had a similar skill set to what Thomas Castanelos had, although he was a more prolific passer. But Thomas Castanelos has the kind of prototype that Gus Malzahn looks for in his quarterbacks, with the ability to lean into his run-heavier approach, with how good he is running the football. Plus, you got an improved offensive line. You got 3 offensive linemen out of the portal that have combined for 66 total starts. This was an offensive line last year that was incapable of blocking a cockroach. You bring in 2 veteran wide receivers, Squirrel Wright from Tennessee, who's a really good deep threat. I've watched him a lot over these last couple of years down in Knoxville. Deuce Robinson, remember when USC and LSU played week 1 in Vegas, and you had that wide receiver who made that crazy one-handed catch? Deuce Robinson was that guy. He has really good size, good length. He could be similarly to what Johnny Wilson was for this offense a few years ago. Somebody that you just throw the football up when he has one-on-one coverage and no safety help over the top. Defensively and offensively, FSU is miles better than what they were in 2024. And it's hard to have a lot of confidence in Florida State this year due to the amount of hype that this team received during last year's offseason. You thought FSU would have had a top 10 team with the way this team was talked about. And instead, they end up losing to teams like Duke. It was just miserable watching Florida State. But despite having one down year, Mark Norvell, we can't overlook what he's done during his time in Tallahassee. Prior to last season, FSU did nothing but improve in the win column. And I'm willing to give Mike Norvell the benefit of a doubt that last season was just a lot of character development for him. Some days you win, and some days you build character. And all 2024 was for Mike Norvell was a character building moment. And sometimes it takes having a bad season like that, which is arguably the worst season in the history of Florida State football, to realize that, you know what, we got to make necessary changes if we're going to be able to get back to the level that we expect it to be after we went undefeated and we got robbed of a playoff spot by the CFP committee. And with how the ACC is set up, I mean, Miami definitely could win it all in terms of the ACC title. Same thing with Clemson, but nothing's guaranteed in this conference. And this conference is kind of similar to what the Big 12 is. There's not really a large gap between the best teams in this conference and the worst teams in this conference, which is why I can't see Florida State winning anything less than at least 6 games. And this is coming from a Miami fan. You have to be really awful once again at everything for Florida State to be as bad, or if not worse than what they were last season. I really don't think it can get any worse. We didn't see Willie Taggart, Jimbo Fisher have a season that was disgustingly as bad as what we saw in 24. And the only way for Florida State is up at this point. You can't get no worse than what you were. And with what they have from their freshman class that they brought in, expect to see a lot of those guys stepping up in big ways. Mark Norvell doesn't run FSU football the same way now that he was around this same time last year, which is why I still believe that Florida State is in good hands with him. I would be more worried if you saw Mike Norvell doubling down on the same approach that got FSU in that spot that they were in anyway last year. Most coaches that are terrible don't make adjustments, or at least they make adjustments when it's too late. Mark Norvell, once that season ended, he cleaned house with the entire coaching staff. He overhauled his approach to the transfer portal. These are the signs that you look for in a competent head coach. He still had his players fighting to the very end, although it is fair to question the effort of a lot of guys that they had. You know, some guys just decided to mail it in. But one thing about Mike Norvell is that he doesn't hesitate to make changes. And oftentimes when he does, they end up working out pretty well. This is one of the better coaching staffs in college football, believe it or not. Gus Malzahn is a veteran. The last time he was strictly an offensive coordinator, he helped Cam Newton lead Auburn to the national championship 15 years ago. And Tony White, if he does another good job with Florida State's defense, like how he has his previous 2 stops, not only is he going to be a finalist for Assistant Coach of the Year, but Florida State probably is going to have to replace him next year because he ends up getting a head coaching job somewhere. I'm really confident that we're going to see a major shakeback out of the Florida State Seminoles this upcoming season. And I also want to send my condolences to all of the victims of that awful tragedy that happened not too long ago with the mass shooting. Really despicable. I got a lot of friends, a lot of homies that attend Florida State. So my heart goes out to all the victims of that devastating travesty. And hopefully we can see Florida State, you know, give a lot of people on that campus a reason to smile again. And I believe that they will. I can't see them being as worse as what they were last year. I just can't see it. And this is coming from Miami fans. So I'm being completely honest. I'll be shocked if we don't at least see FSU in a bowl game. College football has gotten to the point where we have unofficial trades taking place. Yes, that's what the transfer portal and NIL has done in this sport. We've got trades happening. Nico Iamaleava has pretty much been traded to UCLA for $3 million worth of cap release in return for Joey Aguilar. Now, who won this trade? Was it UCLA or was it Tennessee? That's what we're going to discuss on this segment. Let's talk about what getting Nico Iamaleava means for the UCLA Bruins. In their first year under head coach Deshaun Foster, they finished 3-6 in Big Ten conference play and had a 5-7 record overall. And there were a handful of games that came down to the fourth quarter that they were just unable to pull out. They could have easily been a 7-win team. And Deshaun Foster, he seems to be a pretty decent head coach. Really well spoken, in my opinion, when it comes to talking to his players, getting the most out of all of the guys on his roster. He had Eric Bieniemy calling the plays last year, and that didn't really work out. So you replace him with new OC Tino Cesuri, and he was the co-OC and quarterbacks coach for Indiana this past year. And if you can get a guy off Kurt Cignetti's staff, you're making a pretty good move. And he runs a quarterback-friendly offense. You're going to see a lot of RPOs, more pro-style stuff that translates better to the NFL game, which is what Nico Iamaleava and his camp were seeking when they decided to leave Tennessee outside of the money. They wanted an offense that was more conducive to preparing Nico for success in the NFL. And I don't even think that UCLA is going to be bad this year. Remember, they went 5-7 last year. There were a handful of games that they had opportunities to win, but they just weren't able to win them due to the quarterback play not really being all that good. Nico wasn't dog shit last year. Okay, was he great? No, but he definitely was pretty solid for a guy who was only starting and his first season full-time as a freshman or a redshirt freshman. Going into year 2, Tennessee fans were expecting him to possibly be a Heisman finalist, become one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. The potential's still there. Let's not act like he wasn't a 5-star recruit. Let's not act like the athleticism, the arm strength, the tangibles, the tools that you look for in a future first-round pick aren't there out of Nico. There's a reason why Tennessee threw so much money at him when he was coming out of high school. They were flying this guy out on private jets on recruiting visits. And if Nico Iamaleava ends up living up to the high expectations that he had coming out of high school, and he does take that big step in year 2 at UCLA that Tennessee and Josh Heupel were expecting him to take, UCLA gets a transcendent quarterback that transforms their program. They haven't had a quarterback to be excited about since they had Josh Rosen. The quarterback play hasn't really been that great. I mean, Dorian Thompson-Robinson was pretty good, but from a talent standpoint, Nico Iamaleava, he's one of the better talents that they've had at this position for a while. So UCLA getting Nico probably adds maybe 2-3 extra wins in the W column for the Bruins. Now let's talk about what getting Joey Aguilar means for Tennessee football. They're giving him an NIL deal rumored around like $1.2 million, which is way less than what you were going to have to pay Nico. They also flirted around trying to get some other quarterbacks off other teams. But Joey Aguilar, you're getting probably one of the better quarterbacks that you could have gotten with the situation that you find yourself in right now. He's had 56 passing touchdowns over his past 2 seasons at Appalachian State. And Josh Heupel runs a quarterback-friendly offense. This offense that he runs, this veer and shoot from this Art Briles, Baylor kind of system, makes it easy to put up godly numbers for whoever is at center. And if Josh Heupel can have Joe Milton playing solid football, he definitely can have Joey Aguilar playing good football. Now, I was watching a little bit of Joey Aguilar film, couldn't really find a ton of it on YouTube. I watched the game that he played against North Carolina and another game that he played against Clemson. He'll be pretty solid in this system. And he probably could be better than Nico Iamaleava. The difference between Joey Aguilar and what you got out of Nico last year is that Nico was fairly inexperienced. So when you went on the road, he tended to be a little bit timid and rattled at times. Joey Aguilar, though, you're getting somebody that is going into his 3rd season as a starter potentially. There is no guarantee that he is going to be the day one starter, although the odds say that he will. But Tennessee also has a few other good quarterbacks that were highly touted on their roster. So it definitely will be a quarterback competition once we get in the fall camp. But Joey Aguilar will probably come on top. But he's not really the most athletic guy. So when things break down with protection up front, you're not really going to get a lot of dynamic runs out of him like what you got out of Nico, but you are going to get somebody that should be more accurate. He should be able to run this offense more efficiently. You can be more methodical with how you choose to call plays if you're Josh Heupel. There were games last year where Tennessee got into the second half and they were just petrified to ask Nico to throw the ball. Like what happened when they walked away with that win against Oklahoma and when they beat Florida and Alabama. The passing attack was just non-existent in those games, it seemed like. With Joey Aguilar, with this quarterback-friendly scheme that he's in, he should put up really good numbers and he should be pretty productive for Tennessee. And overall, I think that getting him improves their chances of making it to the CFP. I feel like Joey Aguilar, based off what we saw between these two quarterbacks last year, is ahead of Nico. Nico still has a lot of room to grow, and we don't necessarily know if Nico's going to make that next jump in year 2 that this coaching staff in Knoxville was hoping him to make. So for you to get a proven veteran starter that pretty much is going into his 3rd season starting, I think this was a pretty good pickup. Overall, though, I feel like UCLA won this trade, just being honest, only because when you look at what UCLA football has been these last couple of years, haven't really been that talked about nationally. Getting somebody like Nico is going to put fans in the seats. You're getting somebody that's a hometown kid. He's Polynesian, and you know these Hawaiians are pretty popular in the area. So you're going to have Jaden Mavia versus Nico, Hawaiian versus Hawaiian quarterback. That's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. But also, I expect Nico to take that big step in year 2 this year as a starter. And if he does, UCLA is going to have a quarterback that, not this year, but maybe next year, depending on how well they're able to use the transfer portal, how well they continue to recruit, eventually could have them competing for a top 5 finish in the Big Ten Conference, possibly. And UCLA does have some decent receivers. They got a 4-star that was highly touted from a few recruiting cycles ago. He got in as a true freshman. He was pretty impressive. You know, they still have a lot of question marks at every position, but they went 5-7 last year, and their toughest games this year are against Penn State and Ohio State, and every game other than that is pretty winnable for the Bruins. And if, like I said earlier, we see Nico take that big step in improvement that Tennessee was hoping for him to take, you know, UCLA benefits the most. You expect Tennessee to be in the conversation for the college football playoffs, but you don't expect much out of UCLA, which is why this is such a huge win for them. Because if Nico does live up to that potential that he had coming out of high school, you got a quarterback that's going to change around your program, which is why I feel UCLA won this trade. Hey, man, if you listen to podcasts, check us out on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy. Miami has the best team in the ACC this year. From a talent standpoint, only Clemson comes close to rivaling the talent that Miami has going into the 2025 college football season. You are stacked on the offensive line. You got good receivers, great running backs, and you replace Cam Ward with Carson Beck at quarterback. You're not really downgrading too much. We know that Cam Ward was a transcendent quarterback talent, and Carson Beck isn't as talented as what he was, but I don't think the gap is too far off between the two. I think Cam Ward is here and Carson Beck is here. At one point around this time last offseason, Carson Beck was considered to be a first-round pick. And last year, I don't feel like he was fully responsible for how inconsistent Georgia's offense was in most cases. It's like he was throwing to defensive backs at wide receiver. When you have a wide receiving core that leads the nation and drops, you got defensive backs catching the ball. You're not going to have a lot of success playing quarterback when receivers just have butterfingers. My high school coach used to always say, if you can't catch, you need to be playing on the other side of the ball. With the receiving core that Miami has, Carson Beck should put up prolific numbers that we saw him put up his first year starting in Georgia. And most Georgia fans agree that Carson Beck is a pretty solid quarterback. If you give him a good situation, which is what he's walking into, you also have one of the better play callers in Shannon Dawson as your offensive coordinator. And Miami is finally going to have a damn defense this year. They didn't play defense last year. Defense was non-existent. It was just, can we outscore everybody? Can we put 40, 50 on everybody that we can play? And eventually that approach got Miami bitten in the ass, and they lose to Syracuse, and they don't make it to the ACC championship. They miss out on the playoffs. Everything that Miami has coming into this season gives this team the best shot that they've ever had since they first joined this conference to win the ACC title. For as long as Miami has been in the ACC, it's really shocking that they haven't won at least one ACC championship. And what we've seen out of previous Miami coaches like Mark Richt and Al Golden is that anytime they have like a big year, when they win like 9-10 games, they end up peaking and they end up regressing the following year. When Mark Richt had that massive 10-win season and Miami lost in the Orange Bowl to Wisconsin, you saw this program completely fall off a cliff the year after. Mario Cristobal is trying to avoid that. And you Miami fans already know how I feel about Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal is still one of the biggest frauds in college football until he's able to lead Miami football to an ACC championship and a spot in the college football playoffs. When the playoffs expanded from 4 to 12 teams, it should have all but guaranteed that Miami was going to have a shot at competing for a national championship every single year. With how big the NIL collective is, Backman, Ruiz is dropping money like it's nothing on these transfer portal guys, these high school recruits. Miami, from a recruiting and talent standpoint, is better than any other team in this conference, even better than Clemson. Clemson wishes they had the bags that Miami had to drop on these guys out of the portal. And for Mario Cristobal, if you can't deliver this season, you're never going to be able to deliver. And that's just being honest. We've seen guys like Curt Cignetti in his first year at Indiana, a program that you never think of when it comes to football, lead that team to the college football playoffs in his first season. You've seen Rhett Lashlee 2 straight years win a conference championship in the American, then lead SMU in the ACC to the title game and the spot in the CFP. If you have coaches that are doing more than less than what Mario Cristobal has at Miami, how long do we have to continue to wait for him to produce? Every single year, you can make the argument that Miami can win the ACC, but this year is truly different because they have pretty much no holes at any position. They're stacked everywhere. You have a new defensive coordinator in Corey Heatherman, who you bring over from Minnesota. You added 4 of the top 20 highest rated cornerbacks from the portal. There's no excuses for Miami not to be in the college football playoffs this year. There's no more excuses for why Miami shouldn't be playing in an ACC title game. And if Mario Cristobal can't deliver and get this program to that next level, he isn't the right guy to lead Miami football. And I know you guys are going to continue to get upset with that, but this is his 4th year as the head coach now. 10-2 was massive improvements, but Cam Ward masked a lot of issues with this team last year. Not just the defense being bad, but the coaching being subpar. Now this year, with Cam Ward being gone, Carson Beck is good, but he's not a good enough quarterback to just will you to a win like how Cam Ward was able to when Miami got down against Virginia Tech and they had to come back from behind several possessions on the road against Cal. Carson Beck is one of those quarterbacks that if you give him a good team, he's going to produce. However, if you put too much on him, he can end up costing you games, which is what Georgia did last year because they couldn't run the football. Carson Beck has it all. Mario Cristobal has it all. It's time for Miami to start producing. And if Mario Cristobal leads Miami to the ACC championship and they're in the college football playoffs, I'll stop hating on him. I'll give him his roses and the respect that he deserves. I'm not one of those people that just come on here and continue to run with the same narratives just because I'm chasing clicks and I'm trying to be rage baity, clickbaity. Like, Mario Cristobal can beat the fraud allegations if Miami wins the ACC this year, which there's no reason why they shouldn't. They are more talented than any other team that they play on their schedule this year. They had the most talented roster in this conference this year. The only thing that can hold Miami back from making it to the playoffs is Mario Cristobal's awful clock management and his subpar coaching. He has the label of being a great recruiter, a great team builder, but being a mid-game day coach. But he can change those narratives. He can change the conversation about him if he delivers what could be and what should be the best season that we've seen out of this program in damn near 2 decades. Nico Iamaleava's brother, Madden Iamaleava, just finessed Arkansas out of $200,000 of NIL money, and they want him to pay it back. If not, they probably going to sue him. I don't know how that works, but the whole Madden Iamaleava situation shows how shameless the transfer portal has become in college football. Not just with him, but there's a wide receiver named Micah Hudson who was a highly touted recruit a few recruiting cycles ago. He committed to Texas Tech and he didn't really see much action. And then he hits the portal after last season concludes. He transfers to Texas A&M. And despite, only being there for a cup of coffee, he's back in the portal and he is predicted to go right back to Texas Tech. So you have a guy in Micah Hudson who's going back and forth between the ops. This is disgraceful. Who would have thought that the transfer portal would allow guys to go back and forth from a team that they previously started playing for, to go play for the opposition, to then jump back to the same original team that they started at? this reminds me a lot of the Caden Proctor situation when he started at Alabama and then he ends up transferring to Iowa. Then, he stays there for a few months, takes their NIL money, and he ends up starting at Tuscaloosa at the start of last season. There is no shame in the transfer portal when it comes to college football. And it's not just the players thing. How about these coaches like Oregon, Virginia, openly stealing players off other teams, offering them a big bag to leave their current team despite not being in the portal, saying, yo, what's good? Hey, man, look, we know that you love Colorado, you love Deion Sanders, but we got $500,000 for you right now if you enter the portal and you come play for us. And if you're a player, how are you going to turn that down? Certain players, don't really value the money that much. They are loyal to the school, they're loyal to the coach. But with teams being able to steal these players and the NCAA not doing anything about it, to the point where you have a Big 12 staffer coming out and saying that if you're not actively poaching players off other teams, you're putting your team at a disadvantage. The transfer portal in college football has no shame anymore. Between guys finessing schools out of NIL money, getting the check, and then hitting the portal right after, not even playing an entire season. Nico Iamaleava just transferred from UCLA to Arkansas. He literally just walked through the door and 3 seconds later walked back out, taking that NIL check and joining his brother at UCLA, which made no sense to me. You got a better chance of starting at Arkansas than you do at following in the footsteps of your brother at UCLA, unless you think that he's going to make it to the NFL this year, which this being his, third season, removed from being in high school. But the Michael Hudson situation, that's just what kind of disgusts me the most about what the transfer portal has become. You just left one school to join one of their most hated rivals, and then you end up jumping back to that same school that you initially started off. So you just bounce back and forth between two ops. There's no shame in college football anymore. And the NCAA, they've come out with a few rules to get ahead of NIL, try to regulate the transfer portal. But even then, there's just so much chaos that comes with the transfer portal. There really is no way to completely regulate this thing without making these guys employees. And this isn't the first situation that you've seen players like double dip between teams, finesse schools out of NIL money. Miami has a really talented corner that they stole off Wisconsin that agreed to an NIL deal that I believe was for multiple seasons. And when Wisconsin found out Miami was tampering with them, they wouldn't put his name in the portal. So what he did was he unenrolled from Wisconsin and then enrolled in Miami. And that's how he ended up transferring. So no matter what regulations and rules you try to put on this thing, these players are still going to find a way to find any kind of wiggle room to get their way. But what everything that's going on in the transfer portal right now, this thing is becoming shameless. There is no shame. I could not imagine starting out at one school, transferring down the street to their biggest rival in state, and then going right back to that school a few months later. What really has this sport come down to? Between ESPN wanting to openly rig the playoff selection committee's process with how they select teams, to guys getting stolen, post off other teams, tampering pretty much being allowed. College football has just been a wild, wild west, and there's just no shame in this sport anymore. No shame at all.